Hi, I'm Jesse Gilstrap.
And I am Drew Cordell, and you're listening to TV Binge Drinking. And I guess this is a mini binge because we're only watching the first episode of season 2 of The Mandalorian, The Marshal. And I am enjoying some hot, just boring black coffee but in my the child mug, just enjoying this morning, having just enjoyed the first episode.
What brand of coffee is it? I'm curious.
Right now, I'm just drinking McDonald's premium roast or medium roast, whatever it's called, and just got some of those K cups and enjoying that. I've been getting Krispy Kreme. That's like my favorite
Right.
brand of K cups to get, but I got McDonald's this time, and it's not too bad. Not too bad.
It's a ringing endorsement. Uh, it's amazing how many companies have their own K cups
Yeah.
and branded their own coffee. It's kind of a crazy thing. I myself am also drinking coffee, but I actually got Willie's Remedy Dark Roast. It's Willie Nelson coffee,
Oh wow.
hemp infused, and I haven't actually given it a sip yet, but just put a little bit of regular old sweet cream in there, put it in my Star Wars Tervis, ready to try out this new Willie Nelson coffee. I got enticed by him plugging it recently,
Okay.
so I had to give it a try. But cheers, my friend.
Nah, cheers to you.
Ah, nice, refreshing start to the day, huh? It is a good taste, I'll say that. But I guess I'll get a caffeine kick as well as a little bit of relaxation as well from the hemp. It's a good, healthy combo. Sometimes you need both, right? A little bit of kickstart to the day and also don't want to get too crazy.
Right.
First of all, as we're diving into Mando season 2, episode 1, chapter 9, a lot of numbers to throw in there. The Marshal.
Right.
I thought Dune got pushed to 2021, and yeah, here we are.
Yeah. Yeah.
But no, this is a good start to the episode without knowing at all what we were going to get from our first season 2 episode. If it's going to be more episodic or if it was going to be, more driven by plot. But no, it was a little bit more of an episodic storyline, which is an interesting way to start things off. It's also a confident way to start things off. Like, we know we have you invested in the larger story. Let's continue on the adventure.
Right.
But it also makes sense. It makes sense that as we get started, he's not going to dive straight into some of the larger characters, bigger characters. He's going to kind of be on his way to somewhere and encountering adventures along the way. And on that front, I think this is the best episodic story that Mandalorian has had so far.
Yeah, definitely.
And on top of that, I know you want to probably mention Mr. Raylan Givens as we were talking about Timothy Oliphant,
Right.
because we had talked about Justified previously on season 1 a great deal. And here we are, Justified episode of Mandalorian. And of course, he's the Marshal.
Right. He has to be. I knew I saw the title. I didn't even know for sure he was in this episode. I didn't. I wanted to know as little about it as possible. So
Of
I
course.
started it this morning, and as soon as I saw the title, I was like, okay, this is the one he's in. It's got to be. And then, of course, he is the Marshal. He's played two of them famously with Raylan Givens and Seth Bullock in Deadwood as well. So it's only fitting that he's a Marshall Cobb vamp in this. And I really enjoyed him in this. I had kind of read that he was going to be involved with Boba Fett's armor, and I wasn't sure how that was going to play out, but I really enjoyed the way that the story was told with that,
Yeah, it makes
his
perfect
backstory.
sense. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really cool, and there have been a lot of like I guess in the EU, there have been a lot of stories about like Boba Fett after Return of the Jedi, and there's kind of like always been this. I'm not going to say fan service, but there's always been a push for, because Boba Fett was such a popular character, uh, mainly because of his look. Uh, but, there's always been fans wanting more Boba Fett and wanting more Boba Fett stories, and for him not to just died in the Sarlacc pit, which people always, you know, talked about it being such a lame ending to his character in the original trilogy. So to kind of have this cool version of what happened to his armor, and and we don't even get the full story. We just know that Jawas had it pretty soon after Return of the Jedi. I like the little story of this town, that because it does have that Western vibe, um, with Cobb Vamp kind of, being the one that takes it upon himself to liberate this little town that got taken over by some miners, and he uses the Boba Fett armor to his advantage, and he puts himself in a bit of power, but he seems like an honorable person, and I really kind of like that spin. I wasn't sure what his character was going to be when we first introduced to him. I didn't know if he was going to be kind of, sleazy or corrupt, but I kind of liked the more positive spin on his character because I just loved Timothy Oliphant, and I I really enjoyed him in this, and I liked kind of his chemistry with Pedro Pascal. I really liked their kind of their banner, and uh, I, I really liked those two characters together on screen. It was really enjoyable.
And I will say too, in relation to him seeming like a decent guy, he also has a little bit of roughness as well, which
Right.
is also fitting for him. Timothy Oliphant has always had that, just a little bit of edge, rough and tumble kind of vibe too,
Yeah.
but ultimately a decent person. It really played off really well. I enjoyed that, and it did everything it needed to do without being too sentimental or too anything else. It just told its story really well. But before we're kind of skipping ahead just a little bit because the story doesn't
Yeah.
get there for a while. This is, I'm all but certain it's the longest episode of the series so far, isn't it?
Yeah. That sounds right.
And it's also the first episode that Jon Favreau directed. He's obviously been behind the series from the very start and written the series, but never directed until this episode. And it's hard to say. Like, I think he's a good director, and I feel like you can see his stamp on here and his confidence as a filmmaker.
Yeah.
But also, I think they figured out the technology in season one and what they could and couldn't get by with. And now that they've had a successful first season, they are going all out. And you get that feeling right from the start of the episode where the world just feels more full
Yeah.
and bigger, like it just really well executed from a production standpoint, just I really want to focus more on those murals at some point. uh, I need to look at all that graffiti a little bit closer.
Yeah.
But yeah, we get things started, and before we get to Timothy Oliphant, we get to John Leguizamo, and
Right.
that was a fun start to the episode. I think it's fun to see that type of fighting arena. I just really enjoyed too the humor at play too. Uh, it's everything was, I think, well calibrated in this episode. That's
Yeah.
part of what seemed to work so well for me. The tone really felt singular. And not that I think, obviously, we talked a lot about season one and it being a really solid season. I feel like the tone felt even more certain here than it's ever felt to me, and throughout the series up to this point. And that's probably the biggest thing that I've noticed from this episode. Like, it has that mix of action and humor and good pace too. In spite of it being a long episode, it's well paced. Yeah, I just really dug this episode from that standpoint too.
And talking about that beginning, the opening, and we've got Leguizamo's care. I think this is like a much. It's not the same thing, but it's kind of a much better version of the opening of the first season. Which we talk about. You have Horatio Sands' character that was kind of annoying, and just there were some attempts at humor, and it just kind of came off obnoxious more than it needed to. That this little setup in the Gamorrean Guard fight, which I thought was cool, with their axes and just the vibe of that place. And you're right about the graffiti. I was thinking the same thing. Watch it, like, okay, I'm gonna have to come back and kind of pause and zoom in and look and see what's going on. But I really kind of like how that scene played out. It is almost uh, kind of reminded me of Batman. Batman Begins in a way, with uh, the way he ends up stringing him up and questioning him
Yeah.
a little bit. But with a little darker twist. I liked kind of the darker vibe that it was kind of starting off kind of a little bit darker. Maybe his edge is still intact, and he's still got a little bit of his darker side. But in his mind, the guy had set him up to get killed to take his armor, so he doesn't have any. He said he wouldn't kill him himself by his own hand, but he lets things kind of happen uh, after he gets his information, and the child just uh, sits there and cheers as all this violence goes on, which I thought was pretty funny. I liked the child kind of, which was in the trailers, but when he's got the little birds coming out, getting ready to shoot, the child closes the hatch on his carrier. I like that little touch, and there's not really a lot of the child stuff in this episode,
No.
uh, which in a way is surprising, but not disappointing really, because we know, I mean, there's going to be more, but there were plenty of little moments that I think is going to keep the people that are watching specifically for that reason happy. But what I did not expect this episode was to be, well, you mentioned Dune earlier, but I got to thinking more specifically about Tremors. I didn't know
Oh yeah.
I was I was going to be watching a Tremors remake. Uh, but I really enjoyed kind of the story with the crate dragon, and it's actually this kind of goes back. There's something from the Knights of the Old Republic video game from way back in 2003, which was one of the best Star Wars games ever. But there was a little side quest that Darth Revan, well, spoilers for people who haven't played, but your character that you play in Knights of the Old Republic helps hunt a crate dragon on a side quest on Tatooine, and it had the Sand People and everything down to the pearl inside the crate dragon was from this. And Filoni's like a huge fan of all sorts of Star Wars material, so it doesn't surprise me that they would be digging something like this out and fleshing it out a little bit. And
I mean, they referenced the holiday special in
yeah,
the first season,
yeah, that's
so
true too. Yeah, there's no telling what what they're pulling their inspiration from the previous material, but this is a slightly more um, I guess sacred place than the holiday special. One of the most popular, classic Star Wars games ever, and it's cool to see kind of that come out. But I really enjoyed this version of it. I really enjoyed, of course, we kind of get a payoff of Mando's relations with the Sand People. I really enjoyed them being back in this episode. Um, I never thought I would say a bantha rigged with explosive devices, but here we are. I think many banthas were harmed in the making of this episode. It's kind of sad that we push Mando to have these relations with the Sand People, but banthas just get treated like bait, and it's kind of a sad thing. But no, I really enjoyed those touches. I liked, like I said, I like kind of the vibe of that small town. What is it, Mos Palo, or something along those lines? But kind of this mythic, lost city in a way that was kind of just lost to the maps and everything after the end of the war. Um, the Galactic Civil War. So it's kind of cool to kind of have that vibe going with it, and of course, all these other little touches with that. And I kind of like the speech they have to give to the people of the town about the Sand People. Well, about the Crate Dragon, and that it's been terrorizing the town. I kind of like that it's just been kind of eating individual things, that it hasn't been it hasn't been just gobbling up a whole bunch of, it's more like a predator. It just kind of eats one thing at a time, but it's gotten a little more bold, and I like their hesitance. It's believable that they wouldn't want to just team up with Sand People, but I like that Mando kind of has to step up in a way that he's done in other episodes before, but I think this is kind of more earned and more believable, that he can kind of be a leader in these situations. It's kind of like the people in the the episode with the Bulldog Raiders, and that Bryce Howard directed, where he
the
kind of
sanctuary.
yeah, Sanctuary. I couldn't remember the title, but he was kind of in that leadership role a little bit, but this is I kind of this is a little more fitting. I like his speech that he gives, and he's able to convince them to join, and I kind of like the looks they give as the same people arrive, but it's kind of a cool feeling when they all work together. I really enjoyed that. I also love like the little music touches when the same people.
Yeah, the music was great in this.
uh,
Yeah,
yeah, it was really cool. Kind of has that kind of callback to the music in A New Hope when the same people are around, but it's also like original. Um, so it's not the same thing, but it just has that same sound. That was kind of the music in A New Hope that kind of in a weird way reminds me of Planet of the Apes, like the original Planet of the Apes score. It kind of has that vibe to it, where it's kind of like this chaotic and but melodic at the same time sound. And John Williams kind of went for that vibe with A New Hope in those scenes, and I kind of like the return to that. in this when they're around. I just really enjoyed the episodic nature of this episode, but also that like we were complaining about last season, that these episodic chapters, they need to at least have a little more confidence and have a little more going on for the characters, and I think that was kind of definitely improved on, at least in this episode. This is probably my favorite episode, not include or well, outside this is definitely my favorite of the episodics, and outside of the, you know, episodes 2 and 3, The Child and the Sin, this is probably my favorite episode outside of those. I just really enjoyed it. Before we talk about the last shot, just give a shout out to Amy Sedaris returning, and the pit droids. And I liked their little exchange, her little return uh, to the show, and I still enjoy her interactions with Mando and the child, and that was fun. Um, so yeah, the little shout out to pit droids still being around and relevant in 2020.
I love the pit droids, but I also love like just you mentioned the sand people too, and how it's good to see them, but also just to see these details that we've seen before continue to flourish.
Right.
It's not like, oh, and here's this little Easter egg, and here's this
Yeah.
little thing. It's instead, it's starting to feel like the world is becoming more full. Like we're seeing these details become just part of the shape of what the series is and what we know of the characters. And the same thing when we see Amy Sedaris again, she's like, oh, of course you've warmed up to droids more since the last time. She doesn't have to elaborate on that. It's
Right.
just like, oh, mm-hmm, I see. Like you're you're becoming a little softer, or warming up more. Almost
Yeah.
like she's like, of course, it's inevitable that you would. I just really enjoyed those character interactions, and uh, it's a big part of why this episode works. Is the confidence with the world building.
Yeah.
It really feels like the series is overall, like, just obviously just one episode into the second season, but like, oh yeah, they figured this thing out a lot more. And on top of that, that technology of what they wanted to do with their sets versus the visual effects, that's part of the world feeling bigger, and shots sometimes feeling more epic. Got some really great action in this episode as well. Just the whole action beat just right at the beginning. It's a great little action scene
It is.
as well, which I didn't know. Like, obviously, you talked about it being in the trailer. The at least one little beat before the action really kicks in, but before the birds get sent out. But there's some good fighting in there too,
Yeah, there is.
and then at the end, and they're fighting the Krayt Dragon. Like, it just really has some awesome moments. Rising at the top of the mountain and
Yeah.
spinning over everybody, and it's like, oh crap. It seems like Mando's become more confident flying around too, and that's only if I'm going to nitpick, I'm going to be like, oh, did he practice since the end of the last episode?
Right.
How soon are we after that?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't want to get. I'm not being too harsh on it. Like I said, it's a nitpick, but I do wonder how much the Marshal was flying around too.
Right.
Did he just go out joy flying? At times, practice. I don't know. It's interesting. Not really unbelievable, because there just could be things we're not seeing that have happened, but
Right.
uh, he didn't seem the most confident flyer in the previous episode compared to this one. But nonetheless, some terrific action beats. like I said, my only, if I'm going to nitpick, it's just in general going to be kind of on that note of Mando was super confident uh, throughout this episode. Not that he always had the answer perfectly, but he was pretty untarnished. I'd like to see him struggle little bit more. But for a single episode, I think it works just fine. But I, I just hope to see a little more struggle as we move forward. You know, uh, as one episode, it works well, and of course, already referenced the final shot, which Lord only knows how that's going to play out. There's so many little things that could happen, characters that we know we're going to see, and the curiosity of how exactly it's going to work out in the end.
Right.
But I do love Tamura Morrison, and he's a really great actor who like he was great in Attack of the Clones, but I think he's the potential within him, like as a performer, I think is even greater. I don't know what their storyline is, but I'm really excited to see what they do with him and how his character is going to behave or not or not behave, I guess.
Right. I I think the just just the reveal of kind of this nomad version of Boba Fett was really cool. The look, I love the
Yeah.
look of it, and you know that he's been having to survive in the Dune Sea. What feels like because Return of the Jedi has been out as long as longer than I've been alive. Feels feels like it's almost been 40 years, but in storyline, it's been 5 years plus since the events of Return of the Jedi, and it's more believable for him to still kind of be out there on Tatooine.
And it's convenient for Morrison's age too. I'll just throw that in.
Right. Yeah. I'm also really excited to see what they do next because it kind of confirms who in the last episode we were on Tatooine, the gunslinger. There was that little moment where someone walks up and I think that it's more or less confirmed that was Boba Fett, or at least very possible. I think we're gonna see. I don't know if we'll see more this season or not, or if we will. I really hope we do. I think that's a pretty big deal. It kind of feels that way. He's trying to find the Mandalorian people. Him running into Boba Fett seems absolutely inevitable, especially now.
Yeah, it doesn't feel forced at all to include them.
No, no. I think that's when I was talking about it earlier, I was trying to hold off talking about the the reveal until we got to it, but I also am really excited to kind of see a more fleshed out how Boba Fett survived story, or I don't have to see it, but to get this new version of some things that have been done before. I already from the look that we have, like just his look kind of tells a story of its own. He's been out here roughing it. I love I love that. Um, so I'm really excited to see what they do with that. I'd give this episode. I think I'd give it an A. It was just it's really good. It's really good episodic episode, and it just has all these little touches. I I still would like to see the show get even better, but it is starting off in very confident form uh, this season, and I can't wait to see where we go next.
I know at some point we're going to talk about the movies, so I don't want to encroach too much on that territory. But you referenced, people being disappointed in Return of the Jedi and what happens to Boba Fett, and it's like I get it, but at the same time, it does not bother me. And a big
No,
part of why it doesn't bother me is because you have to look at context,
right?
and in that context, Boba Fett wasn't this huge deal
No,
necessarily. Everybody made him a bigger deal, and plus people between, especially at the time, if you think about 1980 to 1983, and people have the toys and are playing with this stuff, and
right?
building up what's going to happen to Boba Fett in their minds. And yeah, I just think it's a lot about expectation as
Yeah.
opposed to the context of the story. Meanwhile, though, the Boba Fett storyline that we've had in like Clone Wars,
Yes.
I really like. So I have confidence in this team in knowing what to do with Boba at this stage in his life, and uh, I'm really curious too, like how it's gonna unfold, not just in general, but within the world of the Mandalorian. Because even though it's episodic, it's still always focused on obviously the Mandalorian,
Right.
as opposed to Clone Wars, which was very episodic at times. Just you can go anywhere. Like, oh, now we're going to focus on this character. We're going to have a whole Boba episode,
Right.
and I don't know. Maybe Mandalorian will do that sometime. Focused entirely outside of our main view. I don't necessarily expect that, but I'd be curious if they would. But nonetheless, I do think this was a great start. But this is our only slight disagreement, because I would give this an A-,
Okay.
at least for the time being. This is the freshest review we've had, uh,
Yeah.
talking about any of these episodes. So we just watched it as it came out this morning. So, nonetheless, like I do think that's where I would fall, and it's obviously not too far away from what you were saying as well. Like it's really terrific in so many ways. A fun episode and a great start to the season as well. Yeah, I really enjoyed myself with it.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, it, and I'm the same way about Boba Fett too. That it was more of like a just kind of acknowledgement of other people's reactions to it, but I was never really bothered by the way he went out. But I did enjoy kind of the speculations of whether he survived or not,
Right.
and to see like a new version, kind of more definitive version of that, is something that I'm excited about and am very open to. And again, Dave Filoni and company, but particularly Dave Filoni, I trust with that kind of story. So, like you said, just from his takes on the character on Clone Wars, I'm pretty confident that what we're going to get with him is going to be special, and so we will see. I know there is a Robert Rodriguez directed episode coming this season. This is pure speculation because I don't know anything about any episodes in particular, but I would love for, if they were to do any crazy completely focusing on another character episode and it was a Boba Fett episode, if it was the one to be directed by Robert Rodriguez, I think I think that might be pretty cool. Um, but that's pure speculation. I don't know anything about it. So we will see, and that's kind of the fun of this is we're not in territory where we're rewatching episodes. We're watching them as they come out now. So it's going to be kind of fun guessing and wondering what's going to happen next or what these episodes are going to be like. But I'm very satisfied with this season opener, and hopefully it's kind of telling of you know some more improvements and some good Mando storytelling to come, and hopefully we'll see a little bit more of the child. I know some people will be clamoring for that, but and I will be too. But I was happy with the amount of the child in this particular story. Uh, but yeah, we will see.
And I wasn't just happy with the amount of the child, I was happy with the amount of everybody involved in the way that the kind of repeating this notion, but that the world feels confident and full. We have
Right.
a lot that we know is going to happen at some point in this season in some way, and I think there's the potential threat of the world getting too stuffed.
Yeah.
But what we've seen in this episode introduced the possibility of a new character, and every bit of it feels natural to the story we're being told. And I hope that as we move forward, that's just going to continue to be the case. It'll just all be innate and natural into the large flowing narrative going forward. So I'm excited for the season to come.
As am I.
In the meantime, though, thanks, Drew, for joining me here, chit chatting about this.
No problem. My pleasure, as
And
always.
thanks, everyone, for tuning in here on TV Binge Drinking. Stay tuned.